Students will continue with how to have accessing the internet. So whatever is internet today is an internetwork that allows any user to become part of it. There is one requirement. What is that need is the user, however, needs to be physically connected to an ISP. This physical connection is normally done through a point to point WAN. Okay, so how this can happen will be so how this can happen will be briefly described. There are different mechanisms. One, using telephone networks. If we see today, most residences and small businesses have telephone service, which means they are connected to a telephone network. Then, most telephone networks have already connected themselves to the internet. So, for residences and small businesses, there is one option is to connect to the internet means is to change the voice line between the residence or business and the telephone center to a point to point WAN, and that could be done by two ways. One is called dial-up service. Second is called DSL service. Now we'll see dial-up service. This is a first solution. What is the solution is to add to the telephone line a modem that converts data to voice. The software installed on the computer dials the ISP and imitates making a telephone connection. But the dial-up service is very slow, unfortunately. And when the line is used for internet connection, it cannot be used for telephone, that is voice connection. So this dial-up service is used only for small residences. Okay. Next we'll see DSL service. Okay. Since there is the advent of the internet, some telephone companies have upgraded their telephone lines to provide higher speed internet services to residences or small businesses. The DSL service also allows the line to be used simultaneously for voice and data communication. So this is one mechanism using telephone networks. The next mechanism is using cable using cable network. We'll see what is it. So over the last 2 decades, more and more residents have begun using cable TV services instead of antennas to receive TV broadcasting. These cable companies are upgrading their cable networks and connecting to the internet. A residence or a small business can be connected to the internet by using this service. This provides a higher speed connection, but the speed varies depending on the number of neighbors that use the same cable. The third mechanism is using wireless networks. So, recently, most increasingly popular has become wireless connectivity. A household or a small business are making use of a combination of wireless and wired connection to access the internet. Due to growing wireless WAN access, a household or a small business can be connected to the internet through a wireless WAN. Okay, the last mechanism is direct connection to the internet. If we see today, a large organization or a large corporation can itself become a local ISP and be connected to the internet. And this could be done if the organization or the corporation leases a high speed WAN from a carrier provider and connects itself to a regional ISP. The example for this is there is a large university with several campuses. They can create an inter network and then connect the inter network to the internet. Okay, so this is about the accessing the internet. Next we'll discuss about network models. Two models have been developed to define computer network operations: the TCP/IP protocol and SOAT and the OSI model. So we are going to discuss. So now we'll start with protocol layering. So we have defined the term so-called protocol in the previous chapter. Then what is this protocol in data communication and network is a protocol defines the rules that the sender and receiver and all intermediate devices need to follow to be able to communicate effectively. Then it depends on what type of communication it is, whether it is simple or complex. If the communication is found to be simple, then there is need of only one simple protocol. If the communication is complex, then there is need to divide, need to divide the task between different layers, different layers, in which case we need a protocol at each layer, that is called protocol layering. Okay, so I'll repeat protocol layering. When the communication is complex, then the task must be divided between different layers where protocol is needed at each layer, called protocol layering. So now we'll see the scenarios to better understand the protocol layering. Okay, why there is a need for protocol layering will be better understood with the help of these scenarios. The first scenario is, in first scenario, communication is so simple that it occur in only one layer. So is it clear? In first scenario, communication is so simple that it occur in only one layer. Only one layer. Then a set of rules are needed, needs to be followed even though it is simple scenario. Okay, the example will be discussed here. There are two persons assumed as Maria and Anne. They are neighbors. Maria and Anne are neighbors and they are with a lot of common ideas. The communication between Maria and Anne takes place in one layer, which is face to face in the same language which has been shown in this figure. So there is only one layer. You can see here layer, here is this layer 1, here is layer 1. Okay, so we can see that though this is simple scenario, a set of rules need to be followed. Okay, then what first Maria and Anne will do that they know that they should greet each other when they meet. So when Maria and Anne they greet each other when they meet is the first one. Second, they know that they should confine their vocabulary to the level of their friendship. To the level of their friendship. Okay. Third, each party knows that she should refrain from speaking when the other party is speaking. Fourth, each party knows that the conversation should be a dialogue, not a monologue. Then both should have the opportunity to talk about the issue, is a fourth one. Fifth, they should exchange some nice words when they leave. So what we are going to see that the protocol used by Maria and Anne is different from the communication between the professor and students in a lecture hall. Whereas we see the in case of professor and student communication, which is second one, it is mostly monologue. The professor talks most of the time unless a student has a question. A situation in the protocol dictates that she should raise her hand and wait for permission to speak. So In this case, the communication is normally very formal and limited to the subject being taught. Now we'll see about the second scenario. Okay, this second scenario will involve encryption and decryption technique argument. Technique agreement will involve encryption decryption technique argument. So we'll see that is assumption that Anne is of, so in the second scenario it is assumed that Anne is offered a higher level position in her company, and but he needs to move to another branch located in a city which is very far from Maria. But these two friends still want to continue their communication and they want to exchange their idea. They have come up with an innovative project to start a new business when they both retire. Then they decide to continue their conversation using regular mail through the post office. Through the post office. However, they do not want their ideas to be revealed by other people if the letters are intercepted. Then they agree on an encryption decryption technique. The sender of the letter encrypts it to make, you can see, encrypt encrypt decrypt. The sender of the letter encrypts it to make it unreadable by an intruder. The receiver of the letter decrypts it to get the original letter. So there is a need to have encryption and decryption in the second scenario. Is it clear? Then it is assumed for the moment that Maria and Anne use one technique that makes it hard to decrypt the letter if one does not have the key for doing so. So we can say that communication between Maria and Anne takes place in three layers. You can see here three layers. Layer 1, okay, you can see layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 takes place in three layers. Okay, takes place in three layers. Which is, then what is assumed that Anne and Maria each have three machines, or they can use even robots that can perform the task at each layer. So we'll assume that Maria sends the first letter to Anne. Maria talks to the machine at the third layer as though the machine is Anne and is listening to her. So here, listen, this is a layer third. The third layer machine listens to what Maria says and creates the plain text, which is passed to the second layer machine. Okay, the second layer machine takes the plain text, encrypts it, and creates a cipher text. So you can see a cipher text. Cipher text. This is second machine. This is the plain text. Okay, cipher text, which is passed to the first layer machine. The first layer machine, which is usually or presumably a robot, takes the cipher text, puts it in an envelope, adds the sender and receiver addresses and mails it. At Anne's side, so this side, at the receiver side and side, the first layer machine, layer 1 machine, picks up the letter from Anne's mailbox, recognizing the letter from Maria by the sender address. The machine takes out the cipher text from the envelope and delivers it to the second layer machine. The second layer machine will decrypt the message, create the plain text, and passes the plain text to the third layer machine. The third layer machine takes the plain text and reads it as though Maria is speaking. Okay, so this is a three layer protocol second layer. So whatever is this protocol layering, it will enable us to divide a complex task into several smaller and simpler tasks. Okay, then whatever example we have discussed just now between Maria and Anne communication with second scenario, it is possible that it could be used only one machine to do the job of all three machines. But what Maria and Anne feel that they decide that the encryption or decryption done by the machine is not enough to protect their secrecy. Secrecy. They would have to change the whole machine. So in the present situation, they need to change only the second layer machine. So is it clear? In the present, they need to change only the second layer machine, whereas the other two can remain the same. This is referred to as modularity. Modularity means only okay. So as three different machines are used, so only second layer machine needs to be changed. The other two can remain same. The can remain same in the present situation is referred to as modularity. Okay, modularity means independent layers. In this case, layer which is known as module can be defined as a black box with inputs and outputs without concern about how inputs are changed to outputs. Okay, then if two machines provide the same outputs when given the same inputs, they can replace each other. Okay, for example, Anne and Maria can buy the second layer machine from two different manufacturers. But as long as the two machines create the same ciphertext from the same plain text and when they do the job. What are the advantages of protocol layering is it allows us to separate the services from the implementation. Then advantage of protocol layering is that the first one, it allows us to separate the services from the implementation. A layer needs to be able to receive a set of service from the lower layer and to give the services to upper layer. So a layer must be able to receive a set of services from the lower layer and to give the service to upper layer is the need. How the layer is implemented is not concerned. Okay, the example again is specified. Maria may decide not to buy the machine or robot for the first layer. She can do the job for herself. But as long as Maria can do the task provided by the first layer in both directions, the communication system works. Okay, the second advantage is, which is called another advantage, whatever we have seen in our example, it reveals that about protocol layering is that communication does not always use only two end system. There are intermediate systems that need only some layers but not all layers. So if we are not using protocol layering, then there is a need to have to make each intermediate system as complex as the end system, which makes the whole system more expensive. Then the question arises, is there any disadvantage in protocol layering? Okay, one can argue that having a single layer makes the job easier, but there is no need for each layer to provide a service to the upper layer and give service to the lower layer. But taking the same example, Anne and Maria could find or build one machine that could do all three tasks. If one day they found that their code was broken, then each would have to replace the whole machine with a new one instead of just changing the machine in second layer. Okay, so next we'll discuss about principles of protocol layering. The first principle is, if we want bidirectional communication, then we need to make each layer so that it is able to perform two opposite tasks, one in each direction, is the first principle. For example, the third layer is to listen in one direction and talk in the other direction. The second layer needs to be able to encrypt and decrypt. The first layer needs to send and receive mail. That is first principle. Next, second principle is that we need to follow a protocol. Sorry, second principle we need to follow in protocol layering is that the two objects under each layer at both sides should be identical. The example is the object under layer 3 at both sides should be a plain text. So the object under layer 3 at both sides should be a plain text letter. The object under layer 2 at both sides should be a cipher text letter. The object under layer 1 at both sides should be a piece of mail. Is a need is the second principle. Okay, so next we'll see about logical connection. What is this logical connection? Means once the two principles have been followed, then there is a need to think about logical connection between each layer, which has been shown in this figure, the logical connection between peer layers. This means that there is layer to layer communication. Layer to layer communication. Then Maria and Anne can think that there is a logical, which is imaginary connection at each layer through which they can send the object created from that layer. Okay, so this is about logical connection. I'll stop here. You go through this in next lecture. I'll continue.